Okay, let's dive into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a delightfully clever tale from the 1890s by the legendary Oscar Wilde. It's called The Model Millionaire. It's a short story that brilliantly weaves together themes of wealth, deceptive appearances, and honestly, a truly shocking twist. It's a fantastic study of human nature, and we're going to break down exactly how Wilde crafts this narrative using the evidence straight from the text. So, let's get started.
Oscar Wilde actually hooks us right from the very first sentence. Unless one is wealthy, there is no use in being a charming fellow. This quote anchors our entire explainer. Wilde is setting up this highly pragmatic, almost cynical 1890s worldview. He proposes a core philosophical dilemma right out of the gate. Romance and charm, well, those are privileges of the rich, not the profession of the unemployed. It's a stark statement about the cold, hard value of money in society, and it perfectly frames the massive problem our main character is about to face.
And that brings us to our protagonist. Meet Hughie Erskine. Hughie is wonderfully good-looking, but sadly terribly poor. Intellectually, Wilde tells us, we kind of have to admit he wasn't of much importance. He never said a brilliant or even an ill-natured thing in his entire life. But he had this crisp brown hair, a clear-cut profile, and gray eyes. He was incredibly popular with men and women alike. Really, he had every single accomplishment you could possibly want in a young gentleman, except the ability to actually make money. He essentially lived on a meager 200 pounds a year, allowed to him by an old aunt.
Now, it's not that Hughie hasn't tried. Consider his rather disastrous professional history. He tried a little bit of everything. He went on the stock exchange for 6 months. But as Wilde quips, what is a butterfly doing among bulls and bears? After that, he was briefly a tea merchant, but got tired of Pico and Souchong. Then, he tried selling dry sherry, but the sherry was a little too dry. Ultimately, his final career was simply nothing. Just a delightful, ineffectual young man with a perfect profile and absolutely no profession.
To make matters infinitely worse, Hughie is deeply in love. The object of his affection is Laura Merton, the daughter of a retired colonel who lost his temper and digestion in India and literally never found either again. Laura absolutely adores Hughie, and he is ready to kiss her shoestrings. They are the handsomest couple in London, but there's a serious catch. It's a love completely blocked by a lack of funds. They don't have a penny piece between them. And that retired colonel? Well, while he's very fond of Hughie, he absolutely refuses to hear of any engagement.
So the crucial point is this staggering number, 10,000 pounds. The colonel regularly tells Hughie, "Come to me, my boy, when you have got 10,000 pounds of your own, and we will see about it." In the context of the story, this is a massive, virtually impossible sum for someone like Hughie to just acquire. This right here establishes the narrative's central obstacle. It's an insurmountable financial wall standing between Hughie and the woman he loves, leaving him, understandably, very glum.
Needing some consolation one morning, Hughie decides to drop in on a great friend of his, Alan Trevor. Now, Trevor is a painter, but more than that, he's a real artist whose pictures are eagerly sought after. Personally, he's a strange, rough fellow with a freckled face and a red, ragged beard. Trevor likes Hughie immensely for his bright, buoyant spirits and his generous, reckless nature, giving him permanent entry to his studio. When Hughie walks in on this particular day, he finds Trevor putting the finishing touches on a wonderful life-size painting of a beggar man.
I want you to imagine the scene Hughie walks in on. A beggar model stands on a raised platform in the corner, and his appearance is incredibly striking. He's a wizened old man. His face is like wrinkled parchment, bearing a most piteous expression. Over his shoulders is flung a coarse brown cloak that is all tears and tatters. His boots are patched and cobbled. With one hand he leans heavily on a rough stick, and with the other he holds out a battered hat for alms. It is the absolute picture of wretched, heartbreaking poverty.
While observing the model, Hughie and Trevor have this really fascinating exchange about the economics of the art world. There is a staggering disparity at play here. Hughie asks what the model gets paid for standing there all day. The answer? A mere 1 shilling an hour. Then Hughie asks what Trevor gets for the finished picture. 2,000 guineas. Hughie is outraged by this incredible disparity. He argues that the model works just as hard as the painter and deserves a percentage. Trevor just laughs this off as nonsense, praising the dignity of manual labor and art and telling Hughie to keep quiet. Shortly after this debate, a servant comes in and tells Trevor that the framemaker wants to speak to him. Trevor steps out, telling Hughie not to run away. This leaves Hughie all alone with the old beggar man, who takes advantage of the artist's absence to rest for a moment on a wooden bench.
The old man looks so incredibly forlorn and wretched sitting there that Hughie is just overcome with pity. This is the pivotal moment of our explainer. Hughie feels in his pockets to see what money he actually has on him.
Well, all Hughie can find is a sovereign and some coppers. He thinks, poor old fellow, he wants it more than I do. But remember Hughie's own terrible financial situation. Sacrificing this sovereign means he won't be able to take hansom cabs for a fortnight. It's a genuine sacrifice. Still, his generous nature wins out. He walks across the studio and slips the sovereign right into the beggar's hand. The old man starts. A faint smile flits across his withered lips, and he simply says, "Thank you, sir. Thank you."
Okay, let's fast forward to later that night. Hughie strolls into the Palette Club around 11 o'clock and finds Trevor sitting by himself. Hughie asks if he got the picture finished all right. Trevor cheerfully announces it's finished and framed. But then, Trevor casually mentions that the old model was completely devoted to Hughie. In fact, Trevor reveals he had to tell the old beggar everything: who Hughie is, where he lives, what his income is, and all about Laura Merton and the relentless Colonel's £10,000 condition. Understandably, Hughie is absolutely red and angry at this apparent betrayal of confidence.
Hughie is practically shouting at this point, "You told that old beggar all my private affairs?" But Trevor just smiles. This brings us to a dead stop. Wilde has perfectly set the trap for both Hughie and us. Who was this beggar really? Why on earth was Trevor, a highly successful and respected artist, discussing his friend's most intimate financial woes with a random man off the street earning a shilling an hour?
Here is the shocking reveal. Trevor drops an absolute bombshell on his friend. That old beggar? He is actually Baron Hausberg. He is a great friend of Trevor's, and, incredibly, one of the richest men in all of Europe. He buys all of Trevor's pictures and specifically commissioned the artist a month ago to paint him dressed up as a beggar. Those pathetic rags? Just an old suit Trevor picked up in Spain. No way, right?
Now, what's really interesting about this is the sheer magnitude of the contrast Wilde builds. Look at the reality versus the appearance. In reality, Baron Hausberg could buy all of London tomorrow without overdrawing his account, yet his appearance was a man holding out a battered hat asking for alms. He dines off gold plates, but he was wearing a torn, coarse brown cloak. He wields so much geopolitical power he can literally prevent Russia from going to war when he chooses, but to Hughie he just looked like a wizened, piteous old man.
Realizing exactly what he has done, Hughie cries out, "Good heavens, I gave him a sovereign," and literally sinks into an armchair in absolute dismay. He is completely mortified. Trevor, on the other hand, bursts into a roar of laughter, finding the whole situation incredibly amusing, and assures Hughie he will never see that sovereign again. Hughie feels he has made a total fool of himself, distributing alms in a reckless way to a multimillionaire. He walks home feeling intensely unhappy, fully expecting to be the laughingstock of London society. That brings us to the tense sequence of events the very next morning. Hughie is at breakfast when a servant brings up a card. First, an old gentleman with gold spectacles and a slight French accent arrives in the room. It is Monsieur Gustave Naudin coming on behalf of Baron Hausberg. Bracing himself, Hughie bows and immediately stammers out an attempt to apologize to the Baron for his embarrassing mistake. But instead of anger, Monsieur Naudin smiles and says the Baron actually commissioned him to bring Hughie a sealed envelope. And this is what makes the story's resolution so incredibly satisfying. On the outside of the envelope are the words, "A wedding present to Hugh Erskine and Laura Merton from an old beggar." And inside, a cheque for exactly £10,000. The Baron, deeply charmed and amused by Hughie's selfless, reckless generosity in the studio, has stepped in to fulfill the Colonel's impossible condition. Thanks to this act of immense philanthropy, Hughie and Laura are finally allowed to marry.
As we look at the meaning behind this resolution, we really have to appreciate Oscar Wilde's brilliant use of language. Let's break down this definition. Wilde is playing with syntax here, millionaire model versus model millionaire. A millionaire model is simply what the Baron was doing in the studio, a wealthy person literally acting as a model for an artist. But a model millionaire, that hyphenation flips the meaning entirely. It means an exemplary, ideal, wealthy person, a model of a millionaire, someone who uses their vast wealth to generously reward true charity and normalize goodness without expectation of return.
This brilliant wordplay brings us to our concluding quote. At Hughie and Laura's wedding, Alan Trevor is the best man, and Baron Hausberg makes a speech at the wedding breakfast. Trevor remarks to the crowd, "Millionaire models are rare enough, but by Jove, model millionaires are rarer still."
It's the perfect summation of the narrative arc. It highlights that while rich people indulging in eccentric artistic hobbies might be uncommon, wealthy people who are genuinely philanthropic and recognize pure-hearted generosity are the absolute rarest treasures of all.
Which leads us to a final provocative thought to reflect on today based on Wilde's timeless work. How often do we let appearances deceive us into underestimating the power of a single, reckless act of generosity? Oscar Wilde's story isn't just about a clever twist. It's a powerful reminder that true nobility lies in giving what you can, and that you never truly know the incredible impact of showing a little compassion to someone you perceive to be in need. Thank you for joining me for this explainer, and keep looking beyond the surface.